You ready, Jean? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 8th, 2021 Environmental Board meeting. My name is Nancy Davidson, and I'm the chair of this board. And due to the virtual format of today's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. We have participants attending by computer and others who may be attending by phone. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when you are not speaking. And if you're having any technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device, such as your smartphone or a tablet. Or there is the call-in information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. At this point, I'd like to begin the roll call of attendees. Jean, could you take care of that, please? Please say, unmute and say here when Jean calls your name. Thank you.
Sure. Beginning with Tom Anderson.
Here.
Saria Balapragada. Thank you. Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Cameron Fisher.
Here.
Rishi Hazra.
Here.
Dan Hintz.
Here.
Danny Madden, who I don't see has joined us yet. Dominic Williams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb.
Here.
And Janet Wall, who I also don't see has joined us yet. And then finally, Laura Labico had an excused absence.
And tonight we have joining us as one of the alternates, it's Janet, and she's not on yet, right?
Correct. So if she doesn't join, Tom Anderson can serve as a regular member.
Okay. Tom, why don't you be prepared for that, please? Okay, board members, as we're going through the meeting, if you have a desire to speak, please send a chat to all panelists and type question or comment, and I will try and track that and wait to be acknowledged. Please do not put any of your comments of any substance into the chat. If I don't think anyone's on the phone, but if someone does happen to dial in on the phone, we'll check in with you to see if you have any comments. You can also press *3 to raise your hand. Our next item is the approval of minutes, and the minutes did not make it out yet for the November meeting, so we'll be considering those, I understand, in hearing from Jean at the January meeting. So there are no minutes to approve, so we'll move through that agenda item. At this point, we'll move into public comments, and I have a few guidelines for public comments before Jean opens that up to the public. Public comments are an important part of the public process. We take them seriously and factor them into the decisions that the board makes. For the members of the public joining us, welcome. If there's anyone in the meeting now who would like to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. To do this, if you're on the phone, please press *3. If you have joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon, and this could vary in location by device. You can also go to the participant panel and select your name and choose to raise the hand, or be located under the reactions menu or more menu. So with that, do we have any public comments? And when you are called upon to provide comments, please unmute your microphone. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Are you a resident, property owner, business owner, whatever? Please speak clearly and pause frequently, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. When your comments are concluded, please mute your microphone. If you do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed. You are encouraged to rejoin the meeting if able, and if we know that you're still out there, we'll try and catch up with you. So with that, Jean, I'll turn it over to you. Do we have anybody interested in public comments tonight?
Yes, it looks like Connie Marsh has raised her hand, so I will move her up and allow her to make some comments.
So I have a question first, because this stormwater topic is a big, huge topic, and I've heard it 3 times. I'm curious as to what they're going to say. Is this the only public comment, or are we going to be able to comment after the presentation?
I guess that's, at this point, I'm okay with commenting after the presentation at this point in time. I'm willing to open it up to public comments because I think it's important to get the comments on the material at hand. If there's something else such as the board report or the annual report that we're going to be talking about, I can open it up for that too at the same time. And this
Okay, so can I reserve time for after the presentation?
Yes, you can, Connie.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Anybody else want raise their hand for comments?
That was the only attendee that had raised their hand. There were 2 other attendees. So I guess Anne or David, if you plan on making public comment, please raise your virtual hand. And it looks like neither intends to provide any public comment.
Great. Okay, this closes public comments on the general topics. We will reopen it briefly in each of the agenda items. So at this point, we'll move into the agenda items for tonight's meeting. The first one is the Storm and Surface Water Master Plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Gary, who I believe is leading this effort. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you, Nancy, and everyone else. Let me share my screen here before I get started. Okay. So good evening, Environmental Board. I am your Utilities Engineering Division Manager, Gary Shimmick, here to present a status report on our Storm and Surface Water Master Plan and our Wastewater Master Plan. I would like to introduce our core team members at this time, so you know who is fully part of the team here in providing this information. Alan Quinn, our Senior Stormwater Engineer, he is unfortunately not able to make it tonight. Matt Ellis, Senior Utility Engineer, you'll be hearing Matt later today. And then Dave Jacobs and Francesca White from Osborne Consulting. This is a combined update because the strategic framework is common to both efforts. And in addition, an overarching goal of both plans is to protect our valuable water resources from both the potential impacts of sewer overflows, septic system infiltration, and stormwater runoff. We will be seeking your feedback related to our strategic framework. But here are a few questions I'd like you to consider tonight as we go through the presentation. Do the focus areas cover the most important categories of stormwater, surface water, wastewater work that will support the delivery of high quality services to the community? Do the purposes make each focus area come alive in a way customers will understand? Do the objectives address the most significant issues associated with each focus area and purpose? And finally, do you have any specific strategies or actions that you want to make sure we consider in the next phase of our work? We have 7 sections to cover today that will include planning hierarchy, master plan contents, strategic framework, focus areas, purposes and objectives, line of sight example. Matt is going to be taking over at that point and hopefully really bringing everything into context with that slide. And then next steps. As I mentioned in the staff report, one of the most important pieces of our master plans that will set us apart from many others is the inclusion of a clear line of sight that stretches from the city's comprehensive plan all the way to our annual staff work plans. For me, this is important for 2 reasons. First, it ensures the policies, directives, and goals from the city's comprehensive plan and also the city's strategic plan flow down and fuel the master plan, capital improvement plan, and the annual staff work plans. In other words, it helps make sure we are working on projects and programs that reflect the most important needs of our city and our community. Second, this line of sight approach allows staff to better understand how their day-to-day work is helping achieve long-term goals. As a reminder from an earlier presentation this year, our master plans have the following general sections: system description, basic characteristics, problem identification, problem prioritization, strategic framework, and recommended actions. We covered the first four elements of the master plans at that last presentation I mentioned. I believe that was in April or May. The remaining portion, mostly of today's presentation, will be focused to the strategic framework, hence it's highlighted. But I wanted to let you know we will be coming back to you, the other boards and commissions and city council, and the community at large in the first quarter of 2022 with the preliminary actions for your review and feedback. Our strategic framework has 6 building blocks. They are focus area, purpose, objectives, strategies, metrics, and actions. Very similar to, I believe, what you've seen for the climate action plan. Is a little bit different, but a very similar format. And for the rest of tonight, again, we'll be focusing on the first 3 building blocks: focus area, purpose, and objectives. I did want to let you know that over the past few months, since we've last met, a team including about 15 staff and a few community members have worked closely with Osborne Consulting to develop preliminary information for these elements. The meetings, several meetings that we had, were very lively, with everyone really stepping up and participating as a solid group. This information tonight is preliminary because we are, of course, very open to incorporating edits based on your feedback tonight. We have already presented to and received good input from the Parks Board, Policy and Planning Commission, and City Council. I also provided a written report to the Economic Vitality Committee, and I need to follow back up with Jen Davis-Hayes if there were any comments from there. I will mention some of the key feedback that we have already received as we go through the slides. 6 preliminary focus areas are: collaboratively plan for future needs, protect our natural resources, invest in the employee experience, responsibly manage existing utility assets, transparent community engagement, and fiscal responsibility. These areas fit together to form what I consider to be a holistic customer service delivery approach for stormwater, surface water, wastewater, and drinking water. We believe that these areas are not only important right now, but will continue to be for many years and truly for decades to come for a utility of our size, or frankly even larger. Now, the priorities of any one particular focus area will likely change over time, but each one serves as a critical foundation, at least in my mind, for that excellent service we're hoping to provide. But I'd like to walk you through a series of slides that highlights the purpose and objectives for each focus area. As we begin, let me just briefly remind you of questions I'd like you to consider. And of course, other questions are, of course, fine. These are just ones that thought would be best to help focus our work going forward. So, do the focus areas cover the most important categories of work to deliver high quality services to our community? Do the purposes make the focus areas come alive in a way that technical and non-technical customers will understand? Do the objectives address the most significant issues associated with each area and purpose? And then finally, for overarching consideration, do you have any specific strategies or actions that you want to make sure we consider in the next phase of our work? The first focus area, again, collaboratively plan future utility needs. And the purpose here is to coordinate across city programs and process to plan and build city infrastructure in an efficient and safe manner based on expressed community values and best available engineering and science forecasting. And when we talk about the coordination here, it's across public works, of course, but also with our Parks Department, Community Planning and Development, Finance, Economic Development Group at large. So really the whole city. The key objectives under this focus area are budget for life cycle maintenance costs and staffing needs. Again, coordinate utility planning across all departments. Cultivate collaborative relationships with our regulatory communities, our regulators, and develop a strategic asset management plan to optimize service delivery. And I'd just like to call this last bullet out. It is highlighted in our city strategic plan under Public Works. Focus area number 2 is protect our natural resources, and the purpose here is to protect and restore our natural resources based on the city's strategic goals, best available science, and expressed community values. And our 4 preliminary objectives are develop and manage a septic system program to reduce pollution impacts, protect existing stream and wildlife habitat, protect our aquifer through responsibly managing utility assets, and restore degraded stream and wildlife habitat. Wanted to mention the first bullet, as we had a really good discussion. Connie mentioned she's been in a few of the previous conversations, and this is most likely going to move to a strategy. And what we are considering is more of a overarching water quality program to be the objective. And the septic system may move down to be a strategy, but we're going to just play with that a little bit, see what you think. But for now, it's an objective. And Matt is going to come back at the end of today and use that as an example to show the whole line of sight. So kind of what you would see for a final product. And we also received some very good comments. People really like the chart that Matt's going to bring up. So I'm hoping we'll have a good discussion with that. Focus area 3 is invest in employee experience. And the purpose here is to invest in our city's workforce to drive recruiting and retaining a skilled and diverse workforce. This was very, very much a lively topic with the Policy and Planning Commission. They really appreciated this. And again, the logic for having it here is the better staff we can obtain here through everybody knowing how great of a place we are to work, how great of a community is, that we will then deliver higher quality projects by obtaining that type of staff and keeping them. 3 of the objectives here: invest in staff training beyond safety needs and accreditation, utilize asset management principles to forecast future staffing needs, and then continue supporting an innovative hybrid work environment. I'll just talk about that hybrid work real quickly because that came up in the last few discussions. And at this point, I just want to hats off to just all of our crews and other field staff that all through the pandemic have worked day in and day out in the field in very tough conditions. And they're going to continue to need to do so and will. For others like me, we've had the opportunity to work in a hybrid environment, being in the office and at home. And it has been very efficient, as I can speak for that. So that's something we just would like to consider as we attempt to be as efficient as we can with our time and resources. Focus area number 4, responsibly manage our existing utility assets. And the purpose here, sustainably operate and maintain the public storm and sewer infrastructure consistent with city's established level of service. And our objectives here are improved response effectiveness under emergency situations to better ensure that those continuity of operations when bad things do happen, because something always will. Participate in regional efforts to optimize the delivery of utility service and really leverage those regional resources. So here I mentioned in a couple other presentations that it's important for us to stay abreast of what's going on, but we did take that one step further, become active, and then also earn some value from being part of that larger regional community by leveraging those resources. And finally, proactively manage our existing system performance to expected service levels. Transparent community engagement. Our purpose here is to engage with the community to build strong partnerships and develop education and outreach opportunities. between public, private, and residential entities. And just wanted to make it clear that this work really developing the strategic plan and these master plans, coming to the boards and commissions and the community, this really hopefully is a testament what we're going to continue to try to do in utilities here, and just be open in all that we're doing and seeking input. So hopefully this is a thing that we'll continue to do. And a few of our objectives here, which again, we're looking forward to much input from you, but also from the community in early 2022, as we go out and talk to them directly outside of our board and commission process, will be to establish clear and concise customer service levels that make sense to our customers, that they understand and want to monitor. And just a side note on here, we have a lot of very granular and important performance monitoring indicators that my staff monitors, and we monitor across Public Works. And again, those are very important, but they get into the weeds. So we need and we want to find customer service levels that are a little bit higher, that our detailed work rolls up to, so we can all talk the same language. A couple other objectives here: collaboratively deliver community education activities across programs and departments, so getting out of our silos and working together to leverage our staffing and our messaging. And then improve implementation of the city's existing communication framework for utility efforts. Connie has mentioned this, and I think comments in a couple of the other venues here. And this is something we really want to take immediate action on, and being as transparent as we can with our work in utilities as much as possible. And then finally, fiscal responsibility. Develop a fiscal plan to support meeting our defined service levels within an affordable rate structure. I think this is a very big one for me, because there's always so much to do. This is a great community to work for, great staff here, but we also need to be mindful of keeping our rates low. So that's why, to me, this plan is so important, that there's an endless amount of work to be done, and we have to prioritize together to make sure we're going after the most important work, keeping those rates low as reasonable. And a couple objectives here: budget for full life cycle costs and staffing needs associated with both existing and future systems. And that would include future systems under an uncertain climate change regime. And then identifying and leveraging federal, state, county, and other funding sources. And here, shout out to my boss, Robert York, who's done a great job at leveraging a lot of funding for all of our utilities, and is a true mentor for me in this. And that's something we really hope to continue. I'm going to pass it off to Matt, and this is a very busy slide, but I think a good one, and we've received good feedback on this. So what Matt's going to show, he's using one objective here, the Create On-Site Septic Management Program to Reduce Pollution, as an example of going all the way, from our focus area objective to the strategies, which will come next, metrics, and then actions. And what we've heard at the recent boards and commissions is this is, a package of material they'd like to see for all of our objectives, this type of flow chart. So Matt, why don't you take it away, and then we'll be able to have a conversation about it when you're done.
Thanks. Hi, Matt Ellis, Senior Engineer, and you guys can all hear me correct? Great. Yeah, as Gary mentioned, this slide is a sample line of sight for a focus area through a defined objective. It also shows the specific strategies to accomplish the objective. This example shows a program to proactively manage our private septic systems within the city, and it focuses on the last 4 building blocks that Gary mentioned as an example: developing strategies, metrics, and action items. And as Gary mentioned, we will develop lines of sight for all of our categories within the 6 focus areas, and come back to the boards and commissions at a later date once these have been developed. And as I go through this, I want to highlight that this is a draft line of sight, and elements within the strategies, metrics, and actions have not been fully vetted. We developed this further than other objectives so far based on a commitment to council to do certain items, namely improving our on-site septic inspection and reporting program, and evaluating our water quality sampling program. And our end result and goal is to ultimately look at how we manage septic systems in the city and figure out a game plan if we see a concentration of aging private septic systems creating issues in our environment. As we look at this, I'll explain what each category is and provide examples. And I like to think of it as a tree. We basically have a very general focus area, more specific objectives, refined strategies, and still more refined and specific metrics and action items. And the goal is to provide a fair, transparent, proactive, and equitable work plan for all to see and identify priorities for the city to focus on. So for this specific objective on septic system management, we have 3 draft strategies. The first strategy, or the strategies, I like to think of are the what. What are we trying to do? And they're the specific work plans or goals to the specific objective. So strategy number 1 is improve private septic system inspection and reporting program. Strategy 2 is to develop a robust water quality sampling plan. And strategy 3 is to replace aging existing on-site septic systems and connect them to sewer within critical areas. And then the metrics are, as we move down up the tree or down the tree, are the when. They're ways to check in, keep us on task, and make sure we are working to accomplish each specific strategy. So under strategy 1, the metric is implement a revised inspection and reporting program by 2025. And then metric 2 is to incorporate a sampling plan into the citywide program also by 2025. And metric 3 is to replace all existing systems in the shoreline buffer by 2040. And again, dates in this are just a draft, but will be refined as we go through this and kind of make sure that we're cleaning things up and things are attainable, but also realistic to the community. And then finally, actions are the how. How are we going to do things? They're the work plans defined within each strategy. They can be capital improvement plans, operational work plans, education programs, or a series of items that work together to achieve a strategy. So under strategy 1, the actions are review and revise applicable code relating to septic inspection and develop staff inspection and develop a staff inspection work program. Under strategy 2, the actions are develop a best science approach to evaluating stream samples throughout the city and develop a program for obtaining samples at strategic locations throughout the city, as well as developing secondary sampling locations if issues are identified. And then under strategy 3, the actions are develop funding strategies to support residents if and when sewer needs to be extended into a neighborhood, and develop a capital improvement plan for infrastructure needs to extend sewer when the time comes. So again, this is just an example, kind of provides a frame of how we want to do all of our focus areas and kind of fill them out. And we'll come back at a later date once we've kind of done that internally, so we can get this vetted through the boards and commissions and the council. But this just provides folks with an idea of what our end result will be for all items. I'm going to push it back to Gary.
Thank you, Matt. And I'll just go over next steps here and then open it up for questions and comments. So not much of December left, given the holidays, but there still is time. And we're going to be incorporating your feedback tonight and the feedback that we received from commissions and council today. And we've already started the strategy, beginning the strategies, performance measures, and actions, and we'll continue that into January. And in early February, we're looking at a community meeting, similar in format to what has been done for the climate action plan. I was part of some of those, and I really thought those were personally quite fantastic. So we're going to try to follow that model in early February. And then after we come to the community, we're going to come back to the board and commission process again, and then city council with hopefully a draft master plan that will be what Matt just went over, really a portfolio of those flowcharts that are probably a little more detailed. And then we'll come back again, go back out to the community one more time, and then do the round again with the final plan that will include, similar again to the climate action plan, where we will not only have those flow charts, but a very detailed work plan as well that we can provide and have that as our package that would then go to council approval. And we're hoping to wrap all of this up by middle of next year, June or July. So with that, I will get back to our board president, Nancy Davidson. Nancy, I think you might be on mute.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentations, both of you. Well done. At this point, I'm going to be looking for comments from board members, but I had already signaled to Gary that I had a comment, and I think he might be anticipating it. And that is, the climate action plan was approved by the city council on Monday night. And within that plan, it requires a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and 75% by 2040. And that's clearly in the planning horizons for both of the wastewater and the stormwater master plans. It means we need to relook at our vehicles and how much we're driving around. And the flow chart signals to me that we're going to be driving more than ever. You have lift stations and pump stations that are in your wastewater system. And I'm not sure if there's much electricity or power used in the stormwater system. That's really something I'm not focused on. But it seems to me that that is something also we'll have to be looking at, and that is looking at efficiencies and how are we going to overcome and get a 50% reduction in each of these utilities within the next 9 years. And that clearly has to be outlined in this plan. And to me, it seems that the goals and priorities that you've identified do not include those. And to me, it is a big oversight, because if you're going to be looking for funding to pay for some of these other goals that you have, this has to step up as one of the more important ones, since this was just passed, because your timeline to 2040 is very short to get to 75% greenhouse gas emission reduction. So comments on that, Gary?
No, thank you. It's a great question. I have some other information to provide as well, but on that particular topic, your timing is impeccable, because the core team and I were just looking at our strategies, objectives, actions, and so forth, metrics. And one that I've relied on as a template has been from Atlanta, believe it or not. They have a really good watershed department there. And they have a strategy, Nancy, exactly like you've talked about, reducing the energy related to their utility delivery system. So I don't think it's an oversight. I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, that will be in some way a strategy here. Now, that could be part of our existing, the managing existing assets or the future. But what that, if you want to look at it at a very tangible level, what that could look like for our new work, right, our new projects, is when we're putting something new in the ground, how are we reducing our footprint, right? What ways are we going to deliver this service with the lowest possible footprint? What does that look like? And we could talk about the same thing for existing service delivery, whether, like you said, pump stations or something else. So you're absolutely right. We did not call that out here, but in the next version, you will absolutely see something like that. I don't know what our first action out of the gate will be for that at this point, but it certainly will be a strategy that will be in line with the climate action plan.
Well, I just want to continue to follow up on that. So this, to me, with these two plans, is a unique opportunity to look at our stormwater and wastewater systems through a new lens. And it also gives an opportunity to commit to the utility ratepayers of the city some kind of way of saying, this is what you're getting, and this is our commitment to you. I think personally, I've written many of these plans in my lifetime. And I just think you have a unique lens right now that you could use with this climate action plan to rethink how we do things instead of doing it the same way with both your existing infrastructure and your new infrastructure. And I would encourage you to think about it in a broader scope, because I think we have to do things differently. And if we don't do things differently, then we shouldn't have done a climate action plan, because we're just not going to have to think about the world the same way. And these utility master plans can be very energy consumptive, both wastewater, and you're not doing water right now, but water as well. And so it's an opportunity for people to rethink about these things on how they do it. And I think that the industry is turning in that way to provide more energy efficiency. And I would encourage you to really try and take advantage of that. You have a short time frame and a unique opportunity. And you're the first few plans that are going to come through that have this lens that you have to adopt to. So I'd encourage you to be creative. That's my comment to you.
And I really appreciate that, Nancy. And I like your, I think we're going to riff off your term of lens, right? That climate lens. That might be actually one of the actions that you see out of this is, just, I did this at another utility, but for our capital projects, looking at it with that climate lens, like you're saying, a very broader perspective on how we could do things differently. So thank you very much, because we didn't call that necessarily out as much in our strategies that relate to us in the climate action plan. They were more, I was just looking them over before the meeting, and more on the water, watershed and climate impacts in terms of precipitation, water reuse. So I'm really glad you brought this up, and we will continue. We will get it involved in here, incorporated in some way. You have my commitment to that.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? I don't want to take all the time. Jamie, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Nancy. Jamie speaking. Gary, I had one question related to how capital improvements will be, like, how will they be prioritized and set forth within? Will they specifically be within these plans, or is it just the framework for future prioritization that will be actually in the plans themselves?
That's a great question, Jamie. So we're grappling with that right now. I think when we talked the first time, we are using a fairly robust prioritization criteria, which we shared with you guys and gals before, for all of our potential projects. So that's going to continue to happen on the project level. As you and those Jamie, you'll see those will be, again, capital projects, be one of many actions you'll see. But then we have to get into, and what we need to talk about is, let's call out the focus areas. How are we going to prioritize those? Which one is most important now, or the objectives? So that's, we may use those same criteria, but it's just a great question. And when we come back next time, we'll have a better answer, but we're going to do it both ways. Is that on the actions, you'll see prioritization criteria for those, but we'll also have some type of, level of effort, priority on the focus areas and objectives themselves. I think one way that it will manifest, if you go back to Matt's slide, is the dates, right? So we might have metrics or goals that we want to meet. Some of them that are more pressing will have earlier dates. Others that are really important that we want to keep on everybody's radar, but they're going to take a little more time, might have a longer date. So that might be a very pragmatic way to get at that question, Jamie, for as we go down the flow chart.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, you read my mind on where I was going with that, because I'm just curious, like these focus areas, how does the rubber meet the road on how we actually prioritize? At times, some things will be at odds, or at least fighting for the same dollars or time and effort. So I just think from reading through this, that still feels like a big outstanding question, which you just acknowledged that it is. But that's really, especially with things like Nancy's mentioning, I think our framework as a city for how we evaluate how we're spending time and money is what I would hope would be a really key outcome of what we have coming out of these plans. So just would appreciate it and continue to stay up to speed on the developments as you get further along with that process.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, we don't want to be silent on that, because everything, hopefully everything you've seen tonight and everything you will see, this is all great stuff, right? But we can't, acknowledge them when we can't do it all at the same time. So, we need to, that's what we're funded to do, right? We've got to make those hard calls, recommendations to you, so that we can get your feedback. So thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you, Gary. Dawn, you have some comment and questions?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Gary, Matt, thank you for your presentation. That was very good. First, I want to echo Nancy's comment. I think you have an opportunity here to tie the climate action plan to your CIP program going forward and leverage that and use that to your advantage. My questions for you are more out of curiosity. So do you know the percentage of septic systems in Issaquah? How many residents, percentage wise, are on septic versus sewer?
Matt, Alice, I think you have the hard number. I don't know if you have a percentage.
I don't have a percentage. I know there are 380. I think it's within like 10 in the city that are on septic, but there is a good portion that are in the Sammamish Plateau water service area. So I would say almost half are not in our service area, but they're still within what they'd still have to abide by city code. And so part of the challenge with this will be collaborating with Sammamish Plateau, and they're fully aware that this is one of our objectives, and we've been in conversations.
Okay, so 380 to me does not sound like a very large number for the city of Issaquah. So it's not a giant percentage.
It's not, but they're in challenging locations, and obviously we're
Yeah.
trying to focus on spots that are in critical areas.
Okay, and then you mentioned your emergency response plan. That's kind of dear to me. Do you have a emergency response plan specific to utilities, or do you fall inside the city's comprehensive plan?
At this time, we're within the cities, and I think you all may know, but if you don't, I'll let you know. We have relatively new emergency manager Lee Shin. Very excited that he's here. So that is one. Again, we talk about potential actions you might see. I think that's going to be. We're going to dip our toe in the water on that. Don, I'd like to work with Lee as part of the implementation of this to maybe just highlight utilities a little more, not its own thing necessarily, but maybe look at a few things that we should have a very specific maybe SOP for in terms of emergency response for utilities. But this time, no, we do not. We do have, I'll give you one example though, Don. We've just been working on updating our, Matt, I think you're helping out with this with Harvey Walker, our winter storm SOP. So that's one that we've had and we're going to update as well. And there may be others like that, but again, that falls under the whole city rubric.
Okay, thank you. And then Matt already answered my last question, but one more question. On your rates, do you know how they compare to your neighboring cities? Are they mid-range, high, low? Do you know where you sit in the rate matrix compared to your neighbors?
That I do not. Given my relative newness here, I'm going to actually answer that from when I was at Redmond, and I think you guys are pretty mid, not high, not low, from what I understand. But I could be corrected by Matt or anybody else on this call on that.
I know we just went through the rate study for all the utilities, water, sewer, and storm, and we were mid-range, but I can't say specifically compared to what city, how we fell, but I knew our goal for the short term was to not raise rates, and our CIP reflected that.
I really appreciate your question because I've done a lot of work with Cascade Water Alliance the last 10 years on affordability, and affordability is different in every community. So I think that's part of what we can, what I need to learn more here. What is affordability for us, and how does that relate to our utility rates?
Yeah, rates are important to me, or more so, minimizing the spikes in rates are important to me. So, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Matt. This is Nancy again, and I'm going to call on Tom Anderson for his questions. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Nancy. Tom Anderson here. I have a comment on transparency to the public on projects. Now, so some of these strategies had specific measurables. I guess I can't recall exactly how the slides showed this on the transparency issue, but I'm wondering what you have in mind in terms of a measurable for such a thing as public projects.
Tom, that's a great question. So I completed with my colleagues at Redmond a very similar plan there, and that was the most difficult one. And what we chose to do, and what I think we're thinking about here is a couple metrics. Could be number of engagements with community just outside of the projects, right? That maybe they're quarterly engagements where we're talking about what Don was just mentioning, talking about our rates, talking about our service deliveries. So it could be metrics, how many times we're out providing those. It could be volunteer opportunities that we have where we're doing plantings, but we're also talking about what we're doing. It also could be are we reaching out to all of our X% of our communities about all the services that we provide and that are there for taking advantage of. So those are just some ideas, but we would love your input on that. That's what we're really hopefully going to get those from you, but also the February meeting where I highlighted, that is where we're of course going to have some good ideas, but I'm hoping we're going to get a lot of input from the community on that. What do they mean by engagement, right? What do we all mean by it? And that's where I want to come to that common ground.
Well, so here's a suggestion. Maybe it's inappropriate for me to get into details on a specific project, but the SPAR pump booster project, for example, I'm a party of record. I as a citizen, indicated I'm interested in that project, and it's I don't know. It's been several months since I've gotten an update on that. I think the last update was simply, oh yeah, we've approved the project. Well, and I've been over there. I've observed that things are happening. What's happening? I would like a report like monthly or something like that as a party of record. I would suggest that the city, when they have an active capital improvement project such as that, people who sign up as party of record should get regular updates. Regular might mean monthly. Just to reflect on that on some other jurisdictions here, I'm signed up for the King County's project on the East Lake Sammamish Trail, which is a trail I'm interested in, and they're doing a bang up job. And at first I thought, oh, this is too much information, but now
Right.
I've kind of gotten into it, and I enjoy getting. It's every week now. They just a page or two or something with a few photos and all that, but it helps me as a citizen. I get more invested in that project.
Right.
Now, I guess it could work the other way. Maybe I'd be out if I were a property owner, I'd be outraged by something. But
Thank you, Tom.
anyway,
That's great.
I find it it gets me connected and invested to that project. It makes me more excited about seeing the end result, and I can't wait to actually go be on that trail when it's finally opened. So
Oh, thank you, Tom.
I think that's and I mean they're doing it weekly. I don't think weekly is necessarily what the objective should be. That's nice, but I'd suggest something like monthly or whatever, particularly for people who've signed up and said, yes, I am interested in whatever. Periodic update. So I would suggest some specific metrics having to do with frequency of updates to the public on projects.
That's a great. I really appreciate that, Tom. That's exactly the type of ideas we'd like to be getting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I'm going to go back one. Dan, I think I overlooked you and I apologize for that. I know you have some questions and comments.
Thanks, Nancy. No problem. Dan Hintz. I guess I'll start with a couple of comments. Yeah, I want to amplify what Nancy said earlier about energy efficiency. Not something I had actively thought about, but just think that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. And also kind of on the climate angle, I just want to call out, I think this was in one of the policy statements, but really appreciated the kind of, I think, prioritization of looking at, climate change impacts on the hydrological cycle, to just knowing that is somewhat of a moving target. Some we're not so sure of, already probably seeing some of those changes and better understanding how that fits in with this master planning. So, and also just put kind of one more kind of comment, the line of sight modeling, I think is great. I'd be really excited to see that. So those are kind of three validations, I guess, of things that are already in the works right now. And then I think some of my other comments are probably getting down to the strategy action level. So I know that's kind of the next steps, but I would just love to see more emphasis on green stormwater infrastructure in some of our utilities. I'm assuming we're getting there, but haven't seen much of that called out. I really appreciate that in some of the project priority rankings, fish passage is I think called out in a lot of the higher ranked projects. So I just want to kind of give 2 thumbs up to that and just hope that that's continued to be prioritized in terms of actions. This is, I know, a tough one in the city, but beaver management in our cities and streams, I think, is something really important to think about for strategy. Impervious surfaces, so that ties in with the green stormwater infrastructure, but something that is kind of near and dear to me as I travel around this city and see how much asphalt, parking, these areas that like even small little drainage, retainage basins, can be really, really, really helpful. And speaking of community engagement and stuff, there's some really neat programs in Seattle with groups, nonprofit groups, citizens, maintaining some of that GSI, that green stormwater infrastructure. I think the last 2 kind of on my list, and one of these might tie more into the CIP, but just not losing sight of critical priority land acquisitions in heavy stormwater flooding areas. Sorry, I think I had one more. Oh yeah, this kind of ties to salmon and fish too, and I'm guessing also on your radar, but the 6 PDD runoff on coho salmon. I know that's still really in the early works. If there's ways to process or look at keeping that out of our rivers and salmon bearing streams, obviously it's gonna be a longer term thing on the supply side with tires, getting that hopefully worked out at some point. But I think that's a big priority for our coho salmon and our salmon bearing streams in Issaquah as well. So yeah, I think that's my kind of main comments. And in my question, I actually feel a little ignorant on this, that I don't know this for sure, but City of Issaquah is not a combined sewer system, right? So you're talking about stormwater planning and wastewater separate, and they are literally separate in terms of the utilities here in Issaquah.
Yeah. So Seattle really is the only one around that has combined. We're all mostly separated for the most part, but yes, exactly. So thanks, Dan. Those were awesome. And I have a feeling that some of you happen to be on the core team meeting we had this afternoon at 2 o'clock, because you, Dan, a couple of years, you just read our minds. I just want to say at Low Impact, we've talked about that as a strategy, as a way to kind of reduce localized flooding and service mitigation, adaptation for climate change. So you will definitely be seeing that as a strategy next round. And then also just wanted to let you know, one of my staff is right in the midst of the 6 PPD world right now, working with folks, and you're most likely going to see that as an action that we want to kind of take on, being at the front edge of that, of not leading it, but supporting that work. We're already allowing them to take samples in some of our ponds, so you're going to see some results on that, and that's one we're hopefully going to be a leader on. So thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that list. It's great.
That's awesome to hear. Thanks, Gary.
And I have one other comment for you, Gary. As I look at my utility bill that we get, I think every other month at this point in time, I see that wastewater is the most significant cost that we are paying. And I recognize that a lot of that is going to pay for the wastewater treatment charges that we pay to King County, but that's not separated out. I think the utilities are missing an opportunity to communicate with its ratepayers what it's doing with its money, and how much of it is staying locally and how much of it is going externally. Also, what are you doing with that money? All you see is a bill with a bi-monthly bill of $230 roughly every 2 months, just plus or minus. And that's a lot of money. And if we're talking about rate equity, and we see that there's a lot of interest in, incomes in the community, I suspect to support some of the things you're going to try and do, you're going to be looking at increasing rates. And you need a better communication tool, and that can't be just at the time of a rate approval or the approval of a master plan. It needs to be on a more continuous basis. There is never a billing insert in the bills that I have seen. There's never any communication of what we're doing. I think Tom mentioned that we're not tracking the projects and getting those communicated of what we're paying for with our utility infrastructure or our utility rates. And I think you're not getting the community's buy-in. So if you continue to increase the rates and you see the income disparity, and we keep putting these additional policies or plans into action, you're going to have a problem where the ratepayer outcry is going to start to show up, because King County's doing the same thing. So my comment to you is the communication of what we're paying for with our utility rates comes about once every 6 years, roughly, when you do a new plan or you do a new rate study, and we need to do better. That's my comment.
I appreciate that, and I think that hopefully really want to use this plan as a, there's other tools as well, but as that part of that communication tool, right? If this is a living and breathing document, you will see through what we talked about here, the objectives, the strategies, the actions, and if we can show that in relation to the costs, that's what we're going to, this would be the document we're sharing all the time and updating, so you can make that connection between your dollars are going to these priorities, right? And if we want to do more, that's kind of the other thing we're working on, Nancy, is some of these, a lot of these actions we're already doing. A lot of them will be things we would love to do if we would have more staffing and resources. So somehow we need to call that out. I'm hoping this will be that bridge communication tool in some way, because I share your thoughts on that. I want to be able to communicate that in a way that's at the right level, and then not too frequent, right? Not too in the weeds. So just trying to find that sweet spot. So your comments here, both you and Tom, really are helpful with that, to know what you actually, as a community member, want to see. So that's great. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments that I'm going to ask about the 4 questions that Gary started this off with that you asked for? But before I go there, I'm going to see if there's any other questions or comments. And I know, Connie, I'm going to come back to you at some point. You're still on my list. So anything else from the board members? Seeing nothing, I'm going to go to the 4 questions that Gary pointed out to all of us. Do you have a slide you can pull up of those again real quick?
Yeah, I was actually going to put them in the chat too here real quick.
Okay. I haven't printed out, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody had one last opportunity to make sure that they were read.
I just put them in the chat.
I don't see them. Does anybody else see them? No. Sorry, Gary, try again.
Let's do that. I know what I'll do. Hold on a second. Give me 1 second and I will put my questions on the screen. Okay. I lost my little box. Oh my gosh, too many screens open. There's that. Okay, almost there. Here we go. Make it a little bigger here. There we go.
So what I would like to do is to focus, to get people focused on question number 1, which is, do the focus areas cover the most important categories of stormwater, surface water, and wastewater that will support the delivery of high quality services to our community? Is there any other feedback from the board on that question? And I think you've already received some in detail from many of us. Okay, no comments. Do the purposes of make each focus area come alive in a way customers will understand? And I'll provide a little feedback. At this point, I don't think you've got there. I think you need to better communicate that. And I think I've at least expressed my concerns about it. And so I don't know if anybody else has anything. Jamie, go ahead.
Thanks, Nancy. Jamie speaking. Yeah, I do think I have a feeling that a lot more people will be focused on problems like that they see. And so I think figuring out a way that this is a great kind of strategic framework, but then how does it address, they have certain concerns. How does that then filter into this? Because I do think that was one of my questions is, I think the last time you came, you had a lot of kind of problem statements or issue identification across the city. And having sat in on that meeting, I know that that's going to be incorporated into this, but if I was just looking at these focus areas, I wouldn't be clear on that aspect of it, how that's going to come to life in the plan.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other comments on question number, is that 2, 3, 3? Okay, seeing no other comments from the board. And do you have any specific strategies or actions that you want to make sure we consider in the next phase of our work? And I will just make one point on that. I think getting people off of septic systems is going to be challenging given the significant costs of those changes. And I wish you a lot of luck.
Yeah, I think that came up at the PPC a little bit and the city council, and you know we're going forward with science, right? So we really that's what we're going to focus on, and then the next step would be if we do see a causal link to work on funding strategies, right? So it's going to be gradual and no, gradual, but leading with science, and then taking fiscal issues 100% into account.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, anybody else have any comments?
Yes.
Seeing enough. Let's see. Tom, go ahead. Sorry. Tom Anderson.
Well, so I don't want to repeat what I already said. I guess my comments about transparency and reporting to the public would fall within the purview of that fourth question. Right. So do I need to restate that or something? I guess to just kind of summarize that. Yes, let's work towards more reporting to the public on projects that are underway. It's a part of the transparency strategy.
Okay. Any other comments on these plans from the board?
I have one more. I'll just offhand comment on the septic system issue. I happen to be a resident of the city of Issaquah on a septic system, and I happen to Issaquah Creek. So I'm one of these problematic people, and you know, if the rules required me to hook up, well, I'd probably do it. I guess the challenge would be the cost associated with it.
Yep.
And it's not like I would come kicking and screaming. It would be, well, okay, how can we do this in a way that's not going to break the bank? So that's kind of the thing. If the fees associated with connecting up are reasonable, well, why wouldn't I go along with that? Mortgage my house to do it, well, it's going to be a problem. So that's the challenge as I see it.
That's great, Tom. I really appreciate that, because that's where we're trying to head, is reasonableness with this.
Yeah, so it may mean that the public utility has to pay some of that cost in order to make it viable for some residents. It's a cost to be borne for the common good, I guess, or something. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Great. Well, thank you very much. We have 2 members of the public so far that have indicated a desire to speak on this topic, and I'm going to call on Connie Marsh first. Jean, could you put her up into the panelists? Or
Yes, I just moved her up. So Connie, if you're willing to, you can turn your camera on and make your public comment.
Connie, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Connie after a bit. I know David Kapler has asked to provide comment on this. David, would you like to come up and speak with us?
And I just moved David up into the panelist so he can also turn his camera on or unmute and make comments.
Okay, I think I'm being heard now. I don't worry about the camera. A couple of things is don't we have our new sustainability manager here tonight? Was she introduced? And on to the topic of stormwater. The largest wetland in the city, and a high quality wetland, is in Lake Sammamish State Park. That wetland is fed by the drainage coming out of the so-called Costco area. And that same drainage is a favorite habitat for beaver, and it's been a constant battle to deal with that. But we can solve the beaver problem, get rid of the beavers, and make sure we have that drainage open. But we would then dry out this very significant wetland. How can we retain a high quality wetland in Lake Sammamish State Park and get along with beavers? And that's my area of concern and comment. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And just for reference, the sustainability manager participating in the meeting will be introduced after the agenda item. So thank you. With that, I will turn it over to Connie. Connie, are you on and able to move up?
I just moved Connie back up into the panelist role, and it looks like her camera's on.
That was amazing. My whole bottom part of my screen just disappeared halfway through the meeting. I don't even know how that works in life. Okay, so Jamie, what problems are we actually trying to solve? That seems to have gone missing in this. So the connection with people is like theoretical at this point in time. But I think it's important because we don't even know if we have a problem in some cases. So our problem is, wow, we don't monitor in a lot of areas. So we don't even know if there's an issue. So I think in some cases, what you are trying to solve might not be the correct thing, because what you need to solve is that we don't have enough data to know what our problems are in some cases. So, and I'm gonna take septic. Septic, okay, we may have some issues. We have a larger issue in the fact that we are basically exporting much of our water through the sanitary sewer out of our city. And then we are half on aquifer, and we are combining our water utility with exterior water. And we are, in theory, trying to somehow maintain this balance of water that we had in the past, right? And so when you get rid of all of your septic, all of that water just disappears. And so what kind of a water balance are we keeping, especially when we're looking at different climates, and how necessary is that? And we don't really holistically look at our water system that way anymore. All we say is, oh, did our aquifer recharge at some point in time? Well, that isn't really the point. It is, did it recharge enough at the appropriate points in time? And is it doing what it needs to do to replenish our habitat and our streams and our wetlands so that we can continue to thrive, especially if we get drier summers? So I don't think you're going up quite high enough in the problems that you're trying to solve. And that would go to the metrics. So when you're saying, does this metric make sense? It is, well, I don't know. Are we solving that initial problem that we're trying to solve? And in some cases, you're measuring what you're doing, but you aren't measuring whether what you're doing is solving the problem that you have. And so I think you have to be very careful to make that linkage, because you're trying to solve a problem. You're just not trying to do stuff, right? You're trying to do stuff with purpose. And I sort of see that missing. +1 on the rubber pollution, +1 on the beaver. But one thing that we have not talked about is Lake Sammamish has been considered a receiving water body all this time, and that's a state thing. Yet we're talking about more water going into the lake with increased storms. And so is that an appropriate designation that Lake Sammamish should be a receiving body? And how engaged does Issaquah want to get in that conversation? Because you have people that do have property damage from raising lake levels, but you also have connected wetlands and fish. So that's a nut that I think you're actually going to have to address given a period of time. Then we have a situation where if a storm gets big enough, we stop saying it's a problem. We don't have to measure it. If the water is turbid and you've just swept out all the fish eggs and everything, it's like, the storm was so big. Nobody is responsible. So nothing changes, and we have just basically washed out a salmon population for an entire season. We can no longer do that. I don't care what ecology says. We can't afford to do that anymore. If we have an even bigger storm and nobody's responsible, then we aren't solving any problems. And I would like to see that addressed, because that happened twice last year. Oh, I'm sorry, the storm was so big. Nobody has to do anything because the storm was too big. Are you crazy? Okay, now, you keep using the term community objectives. And so people have been fidgeting around what is that? And I'm confused. Is a community objective something that the city government says is a community objective? Or is it an objective potentially of the neighborhood that you might be doing the work in? So when you say you're going to check in with the community objectives, I have no picture of what that means, because you have a huge citywide scale down to you're going to be potentially getting rid of ditches in an area, right? So I would be leery of using that term unless you have an idea of what you're talking about. And I don't think you do yet. And maybe you will get there. If you actually talk to the people in the neighborhoods where you're doing the work, you might get them on board and you might be able to educate them. So sidebar, we're going to have a 10% increase per year in water rates because of combining our aquifer water with regional water. So y'all need to get ready for that. And that may not make us be in the middle of the rates anymore. Spar topic. Yeah, notices on the trail closures, a thermometer, for example, of how close you are to getting toward the end of your project, and an end date goal in signage. Bellevue has signs for planning and then for construction, but once you get into construction, you're lost. It's like, this could take 4 years. This could, anyway. The things that bug me, we have a past habit of closing ditches and putting them in pipes. And then we just shove it right to the stream without treating it, and we call that good. We've got to stop doing that and go to more natural techniques. And then integrated pest management, which is, everybody goes out and sprays, and then it rains, and then it all goes into the water and flows wherever, right? So that is held in our sustainability department, and it is terrible. It is terrible. And our parks department is one of the worst departments for spraying, and only beat by the school district. So I don't see so far your connection with the Department of Sustainability and what they are doing to try to make this world better and how it connects with water and utilities. And so I think you're going to have to pay extra special attention to that. And you may have to combine efforts in education and changing the rules in IPA, because you actually know more about what it should look like than the Department of Sustainability likely does. And I think I went fast, but thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Connie. All right, with that, unless there's any other comments from any of the board members, I will close out this topic. Anything else? Gary, were you saying something? Your mic's off.
There. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Matt, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your briefing of us all, and you're taking the time after putting you off, I understand, at the November meeting, since I wasn't there. But it's nice that we actually had the time to actually have a great conversation about these topics, a very thoughtful one as well. So thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
Great. With that, that concludes the conversation and discussion around the storm and surface water master plan and also the wastewater master plan. With this, I'm going to move into the next agenda topic, which is the annual report. And I'm going to turn that over to Jean. So Jean, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm just going to provide a brief summary of the report before asking for the board's feedback. So, as I mentioned in the brief cover memo for this item, the municipal code identified 8 duties and responsibilities for the environmental board. And one of those responsibilities was to provide an annual report to the mayor and city council on work plan activities and a self-analysis of the board's work and effectiveness. And the report's due to the mayor and the city council by December 31st. I worked with Nancy and Jamie to create a draft of the annual report, as well as the brief survey that most of the board responded to. And let me just say that although I was only around the board for a brief period, you accomplished a great deal in your first year. To briefly summarize, the board provided extensive feedback on city plans, regulations, and codes throughout the year. You considered the storm and surface water master plan at 2 meetings, including this evening's. You considered relevant portions of Title 18 that impact the natural environment at 6 different board meetings. And the board attended the special city council meeting on the capital improvement plan and provided feedback and additional environmental board meeting on the CIP. You provided formal recommendations to the city council for the EV charging ordinance and the Issaquah climate action plan. And the ICAP was the culmination of your work over 6 meetings in which the board was instrumental in the development of that plan. Besides the formal recommendations for the EV charging ordinance and the ICAP, the board provided recommendations to city staff and consultants on greenhouse gas reduction, stormwater management, recycling and composting, regulatory compliance with environmental standards, and solid waste hauling and management. 6 different board members provided responses to the brief survey last week that informed the self-analysis component of the annual report. So thank you to all those who participated. I know you only had a couple of days to respond, and if we choose to repeat the survey again in the future, we'll certainly give you more time to complete it. For the first question of how well the board achieved the objective to protect, preserve, and enhance the natural environment and advise the mayor, city council, and departments on plans, policies, and programs related to the environmental stewardship, the board's average response was 4.1 out of 5. And overall, the comments were mostly positive, including that the board functioned well and felt appreciation for the ability to weigh in on important topics throughout the year. There were some comments for this question and other questions that indicated there were also some growing pains for the board's first year. One comment referenced that the board and the city departments are still learning exactly how to work together, while another comment felt that the scope of the material reviewed each meeting was too large to give it thorough consideration. On the second question, which asked to rate satisfaction with the content, discussions, and presentations given in board meetings, the average of the responses was 3.8 out of 5. There were 2 primary themes found in these comments. The first was a frustration with the virtual format of the meetings and the need to use chat to facilitate discussion. And on that theme, I believe the plan right now is unfortunately to continue with virtual meetings for at least the first month or 2 of the next year. But pending how the pandemic proceeds, there may be a return to in-person meetings in February or March. The second theme for responses was that presentations generally contained either too much information or were not tailored to focus the board's feedback in the most helpful way. So you can expect staff will work on ensuring meeting topics next year are more succinct and ready for your feedback. For the third question on topics the board would like to see more or less of, the responses all called for more, and topics included existing city policies, parks plans, as well as parks, trails, and open spaces, continued work on Title 18, implementation of the climate action plan, wildlife corridors and some provisions to protect them. And finally, one board member had a pretty healthy list that included more climate change, water issues, carbon sequestration, healthy soils, waste and recycling, salmon, forest and forest fire safety, and forest health and resilience. So as the staff drafts the 2022 schedule and the work plan for the board, we'll look to incorporate some of this feedback. For the fourth question on city staff support for the board, the average response was 4.7 out of 5. So I'll say that's pretty indicative of how hard Megan worked to support the board this year. For the fifth question, which asked to rate your experience as a board member for the year, the average response was a 4.3 out of 5. And many comments expressed enjoying serving on the board and gratitude for providing input on important topics. Some of the earlier frustrations with longer meetings in the virtual format were also echoed in these responses. For the sixth and final question on ways to improve the success of the environmental board, there were again some common themes of keeping the scope of meetings and materials at the right level for board feedback without becoming too burdensome. And other comments included improving the interface with the city council to ensure feedback isn't lost along the way, and getting more comfortable with discussions in the use of Robert's rules and taking formal action. Since the packet was published, 2 more members of the board provided their responses to the surveys to me, and I plan on incorporating their feedback with the rest of your feedback tonight, but their comments were largely in line with those already presented. So there's 2 questions I'm asking for your feedback on this evening. The first is, does the draft annual report accurately reflect the activities and self-analysis of the board? And my hope for your feedback is not necessarily to get into a wordsmithing exercise, but really just to capture if any themes or ideas that aren't already in the draft need to be included. And then the second question is, are there any ideas for improving the annual report for next year? So with that, I'll pause and open it up for either any questions or comments.
Are there any comments on the board report as prepared by Jean? Jamie, please go ahead.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks for putting this all together, Jean. I think the one big area that I think is mentioned, but I do want to just kind of double click on is I think the level of preparation and how a board member can best prepare themselves for a meeting would really be aided by providing really specific, like these are the areas you should read. These are the things that we'll review during the meeting you don't need to read. These are the questions and the discussion items that you should be thinking about at the very top and in some sort of executive summary. I didn't get to this level of specificity when I was responding, but I really think that we might need to think about a common template that anyone that's coming to the board is filling out, because I found myself kind of frustrated at times with getting a 100-page packet and not knowing what I needed to review versus what I should just expect to review during a meeting, and then having to split my time in ways that I didn't feel was always the most productive when we actually got to the meeting. So that's, I think, my biggest thing, and I know that that's been voiced at several meetings, that I would just put maybe a little more emphasis on in the report, at least in my opinion.
Great. Any other comments on the annual report? Seeing none. Is there your second question, Jean? Sorry, it went past me.
Yes, it's really just, are there ideas for improving the annual report next year? Just knowing that this is kind of the first attempt as the first year of the board to kind of present an annual report. If somebody had ideas for improvements or other areas they'd like described, just trying to make it as much your report as possible.
Any comments? Don, please go ahead. Thank you.
I'd like to see the city's perspective, Jean. So what are you looking for from the board rather than asking us how we think the board is doing? I'd like to get a judgment of, how does the city feel we're doing? Are we meeting your needs? So think about a question down that line.
Great feedback. And personally, as a new board who really has not functioned before, starting off in January, trying to figure out how to all work together and all, I would have to applaud this board and all the hard work that we've done, because we've tackled some fairly challenging questions in a short amount of time and covered a lot of ground, in my opinion. So it's very positive that we've worked so well together on all of this. And with that, there's a question from Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, yeah, Tom Anderson speaking. So I don't want to embarrass myself, but do we have this report? I'm looking through. I have it in my email. Was this sent to us, or was it just?
It was included, Tom. It was included in the agenda packet. It was at the back of it, and the packet was, I know, over 100 pages long. So, as Jamie pointed,
okay,
you had to get to the end of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, I think we're okay to move forward with submitting the board report, the annual report. to the city council and to the mayor's office based on the feedback you received tonight. And I know if you have any questions, Jean, you can always talk to me along the way. With that, I'm going to close out the agenda items for tonight and move on into reports. And I'm going to turn it over to Jean on that one.
Thank you. 3 items for my report this evening. The first is on Monday, the City Council adopted the Climate Action Plan. Megan Curtis Murphy returned to make the final presentation, and that included the Environmental Board's recommendation report and the 4 changes to the plan based on your feedback at the November 10th board meeting. The City Council did make 1 amendment to the plan, which included a new target. The new target is to reduce natural gas and other fossil fuel use in existing buildings by at least 20% by 2030 and 80% by 2050 compared to the 2017 baseline. And after they made that amendment, the plan was adopted unanimously. So again, congratulations on your work for making this happen. And this plan will drive the work of future planning efforts in the city for years to come. The second item is that on Monday, Stacy Van McKinstry, our new sustainability manager, also started. Stacy's joined us this evening, so rather than read her biography, I'll pause and let her introduce.
Thanks, Jean. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you. Well, I'm really looking forward to working with the Environmental Board. Just a little bit of background on myself. For almost the last 10 years, I've been working for the state on areas of Puget Sound recovery, salmon recovery, and then water resource issues. In most of those roles, I've been either chairing or managing boards, committees, work groups that are really working to try and reach consensus on really challenging issues. So really looking forward to part of my position as being working with this Environmental Board. Prior to my work with the state, I was doing climate adaptation work in Oregon. So it's been a few years since I've been in that world, but I am really, really excited to be back working on it, and with the focus of this position really being on implementation of the climate adaptation plan. So I live in Issaquah. I grew up in the area. I have 2 young kids. When I'm working from home, you may occasionally hear them screaming in the background. One's at IV, one's finishing up daycare. And then on a more personal note, I'm also an avid trail runner. Love exploring the trails, getting lost on squaw, cougar, and tiger. So again, just really looking forward to working with this board. I'm trying to learn as much as I can from Jean this week, and Megan and I have been meeting, trying to absorb as much as I can before she starts her new job next week and won't be as available. So thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you every month.
Great.
Thanks,
Well,
Stacy.
welcome,
one more
Stacey.
item.
Welcome.
Thanks. The third item for reports is regarding the 2022 schedule for board meetings. Stacy's currently working on building out the calendar, and she's taking some of the ideas that Megan provided, working with other city staff, and also we'll be talking with the city administrator in the next few days to discuss the schedule. We don't currently have a topic identified for January, but there is a tentative plan for February and March. The February meeting will be a joint meeting on February 24th with the PPC on Title 18. And the March meeting would be another joint meeting with PPC on March 9th, which is the Environmental Board regular meeting date. And that would be for both the storm and wastewater master plans again, and the stormwater code update. So Stacy and I are also planning a meeting with Nancy and Jamie to discuss the schedule for 2022 and the transition for board support as Stacy takes over. And that concludes my reports.
Great. Thank you very much, Jean, and welcome again, Stacy. Is there any questions for Jean or Stacy as we move forward? Seeing none, let's move on to other business or announcements. Are there any other business or announcements from either Jean or any of the committee members? Seeing none, well, I just want to thank you all for a very productive 2021. We've done a lot, and the holidays are approaching. And we'll start again in 2022. And I'm sure that Stacy will have a very active schedule for us in 2022. And we look forward to that. And with that, seeing nothing else from the board, I want to wish you all a happy holidays and enjoy the new year. And we'll see you next year. Thank you all.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Good to meet you, Stacy.